It's a pleasure to see everyone this morning. My name's Peck, and I've built a career where I have to make decisions where the outcomes really matter. Australian, if you can't tell by my accent, and I started my career in the Australian Air Force flying fast jets, or fighter jets is an easier term. I then transitioned to fly something called Special Operations Air Support in combat transport aircraft, which meant I was doing special forces, insertions and extractions. I did 2 combat tours in the Middle East. I led over 164 combat missions and something like 500 air mobility missions in all different places around the world. I made a transition after completing my MBA into management consulting for about 18 months, and then have founded 3 companies since then. 1 success, 1 failure, and 1 still going. And I'm here today to talk to you about making decisions under pressure. And so I want to start with a bit of a story about what it's like to fly. Once you're through the first missile engagement when you're flying a fighter jet, the glamour of the dogfight has essentially fully disappeared. I think a lot of people imagine adrenaline and flying off into the sunset and reflexes and all of those things, and that's there. You're mainly suppressing that. Actually, it's more about a numbers game and data. You're looking at angle attack of the aircraft, fuel flow, aspect ratio to the other aircraft, speed, over and over again. You're running that work cycle continuously so you can protect your human judgment. So that cockpit, when you're flying around, it looks really chaotic. But when you're actually sitting in the cockpit running those work cycles, it is probably the most carefully designed decision-making environment that humans have created. That entire environment and all of those systems are designed for one specific purpose, which is to protect the cognition of the pilot from making the decision that really matters. This presentation isn't really about being a pilot. It's not really about decisions, and it's not really about AI. It's about how do you protect judgment. So before we talk about startups, companies, or AI, I want to talk about what we're really learning to manage under pressure, which is cognition. And I don't know how to change the slide, so we'll get back to that. So as I said earlier, when you're looking at the flying a fighter jet from the outside, people are imagining adrenaline and instinct and pressure and aggression. That's part of the picture. But as I've talked about, when you're inside that cockpit, it's all about understanding the environment around you. Where am I? Where's the aircraft? Where's my energy state? What do those 3 things give me for my next options? We're constantly going through that over and over again. And we're not trying to process each one of those with our brain. We're trying to get them out of the way so that we can focus our brain on the things that matter. That's the first connection with AI. Most high pressure environments are full of repeatable signals and feedback loops and time-sensitive trade-offs. And if you're as a human or an operator or as a founder are trying to take all of those in, you can't focus on what really matters. A pilot's value in the cockpit is judgment and cognition. The cockpit doesn't replace the pilot flying. In fact, even an autonomous aircraft doesn't replace a pilot flying. It's all about protecting cognition. Under pressure, the enemy isn't your workload. The enemy is losing cognition. And aviation solves losing cognition by separating the routine from the judgment. Next slide, please. We use things like checklists and procedures. A checklist is a sequence of events that we read off one after the other to ensure that a series of actions flow in the right order. Second thing we use is a work cycle. A work cycle is a continuous loop that we run through so that we can make decisions quickly and in real time. They're short, repeatable rhythm, and both the checklists and our work cycles, we learn and train so they run like second nature. Basically, what we're doing is we're making the simple things as autonomous as possible so we can focus human judgment on what really matters. The checklist protects the process and the work cycle protects the plan. Sitting above that, something we call an OODA loop, O-O-D-A, observe, orient, decide, and act. You observe the environment around you, you orientate yourself in that environment by building a mental model, you make a decision on what you're going to do next, then you take an action, and you repeat that process over and over again as you fly. What that comes down to is to protect cognition, we don't need to focus and run those work cycles faster and faster. We need to have built those processes so that they're second nature, so the moment we need to make a decision, the cognition is protected to make that. So one of the companies I built is called Swoop Aero, and here's some pictures of it behind me. Swoop Aero was a vertically integrated aerospace technology company. We built it in Australia, and I took that from 2 people in a garage. We raised $32 million over 4 venture capital rounds. On that journey, we turned down $100 million for the company. We designed, prototyped, and manufactured physical drones. we coded the software ecosystem around them, and then we deployed that as a service. That's a big company. We had teams all over the world. We had 5 country offices and 110 people. We had supply chain management, manufacturing, product development, hardware, software, in-field reports, safety systems, regulatory engagement, commercial teams, and an executive layer operating all around the world. It's a big, complex company. And I took a couple of key lessons from that company into what I want to teach you next. Next slide, please. Now, one of my personal mantras is growth equals pain times reflection. And this works in a couple of ways. To actually grow as an individual and learn, you have to look at what goes right and what goes wrong in your life, reflect on them thoughtfully to understand what the key lessons are, and take that forward with you. The swoop era lesson's really, really important to think about in terms of growth. Because in June 2024, I met President Biden in the White House and had a conference session with the National Security Council about critical mineral resource supply chain. And in October that year, I shut the company down when we ran out of money. There's a lot of reflection to be done in getting between those 2 points and from having to build a company end to end and then shut it down. The full arc matters because at Swoop Era, we proved a category, we delivered real outcomes. We turned down a lot of money to chase the dream of delivering healthcare supplies to 1 billion people. We got to about 16 million people in total. This has run out. So we got a long way on the journey. We delivered 2.4 million items by drone, and for every 2 weeks the company operated, we saved a life somewhere on the African continent. I'm really proud of that. But what I want to share with you was a key lesson that I learned when I was reflecting upon the pain that I went through building and then shutting down Swoop Aero. Next slide. That lesson is that the key product was the learning loop, not the drone. Once Swoop Aero was real, the question no longer became, can we make an aircraft fly? That was reasonably easy. It was about how do we make the business learn faster than every competitor in the field with less money. There was lots and lots of data that came in. Every flight we flew gave us about a terabyte of data. Every mission that we ran gave us user feedback from the ground. Every conversation with a customer, potential partner, a regulator, or a government entity was more information into the room. We had to understand how do we build an organisation around taking that information, getting it up into the business, getting the right people to look over it, and then build that into a new learning that we can implement into either the hardware, the software, or the operating processes of the business. And that's what we got really, really good at. Getting that information flow from all the different places into the field, centralise into a simple location, get the right people into a room, and then make decisions that could grow the company forward to help us learn and continue to keep our learning velocity and our learning loop inside that of anyone else operating. I want to give you a core example of where that learning loop really, really works well. We had a battery problem in the field. Anyone in here who's worked with lithium batteries knows that a good lithium battery that you have to plug in and plug out of a device can usually only last in between something like 200 to 300 charges before it starts to degrade below 80% battery capacity. And at 82% battery capacity, it was illegal to continue using a battery in a plane. So we started to learn and observe through data what was going wrong with the batteries and make iterative changes. We soon learnt that the battery arcing was the main cause of the degradation on the batteries. And so we deployed new battery approaches, iterative technology into the field and ran that learning loop over and over and over again until we worked out that we could apply a different approach to plugging the battery in and out. And by applying that loop over and over again, we crept that battery cycle time up from 200 to 300 to 400, ultimately to 1,200 cycles. And that was a key competitive advantage for the company, was that we didn't have to ship as many batteries around the world. There were thousands of decision-making and learning loops like this that you run within a company to outpace what your competitors are doing. Okay, so let's talk about what happens when you start to break that learning loop. The core challenge is that in all complex environments around the world, if you have your systems and processes, or if you're in the cockpit of your work cycles and checklists stop working, what happens is the complexity of the environment starts to create ambiguity. So complexity creates ambiguity. Ambiguity creates delay, and delays create risk, whether that's commercial risk, customer risk, or product risk, it's all in there. Basically, what happens is once you slow that learning loop down, the ambiguity and complexity of the environment creates challenges for you as an organization to continue to scale. Next slide, so I'll skip forward there. So what have I seen operating in MENA? I've been here for around 18 months. And I want to frame this really positively for the room. There's some amazing stuff happening in the region. Awesome founders building complex technology and amazing services in a challenging economic environment and a challenging part of the world. What this means is where you've got information coming from all different places in a complex environment, the signal can be really scattered. Maybe you're talking to your product managers on Slack, you're talking to your customers on LinkedIn and WhatsApp, you've got in-person phone calls, in-person meetings that you need to take notes from in multiple languages. What I've often seen in companies here in the Middle East is that to grow a company early on, a founder is often the center point for all that information. It's on the last slide, but that's okay, leave it there. Every bit of information and signal is coming into the founder, sitting at the center of that hubble, and they become the crux for everything that's going on. The founder works harder and harder and harder to achieve the outcome they want, but all they're doing is running their individual processes faster and faster. And eventually they run out of cognition to keep on growing. And so I think there's an awesome opportunity here in the Middle East to use AI as a leverage to build your work cycles and checklists within your company to automate that forward. And I think this is where AI can become more than a productivity tool. So in the pre-AI company area, I had to build a big corporate structure to get information from the field all the way back up to the right decision makers at head office to run that learning loop. Someone checked the support tickets. Someone interprets a Slack thread. Someone builds a board pack or a Notion page. Someone tried to reconcile the product status with commercial reality. And then eventually the right players get into a room and make a decision based off all the information. That's a huge amount of human cognition spent before the decision-making process even begins. AI fundamentally changes that, and Rashan's going to talk about this more in a second. You can have an AI agent set, pull all that information up, centralize it in real time. It can then aggregate signals, find contradictions, prepare decision points, work out what's been happening historically over time, and then give that to the decision makers for them to make a consolidated decision at the exact moment in time. That doesn't mean AI replaces accountability. In fact, it enhances it. What it does is it unlocks human judgment and cognition better and faster than we've seen before. The future isn't about replacing humans within the workforce, or replacing decision makers, or even replacing pilots. It's about building an autonomous system within a company that protects cognition and judgment. So the question for leaders is not, should we use AI? The better question is, which part of our decision-making process should we automate and which parts must remain human? I think about that in 3 layers. First is to automate the routine, your known processes, your evidence capture, your compliance steps, your customer handovers, incident reporting, quality checks. That's the checklist layer, running through the process to make sure the information's in the right spot. The second one is to accelerate your work cycles and accelerate that learning loop. Product signal, customer health, runway, delivery risk, sales reality. It keeps the company oriented. And the third layer is judgment. Get that information aggregated together in line with the company's strategy, your ethics, your vision and mission, and to bring that together to give the core information in the context of your company that a human needs to make the best decision they can. The better future is AI clearing the runway and clearing the human cognition state so people can make the right decisions at the right time. And that's the opportunity now in companies. It's to automate the routine, accelerate the loop, and keep the judgment with humans making it. The future can be led from MENA, and it will be owned by teams that can learn faster than the environment moves around them. With that, Rashan, our second speaker, I'd like to hand over to you.